Hello, and welcome to Lore Watch, a roundtable freeform discussion about lore and your favorite media. I'm your host, Joe Perez, one of several lore-focused folks from Blizzard Watch, and I've got my super co-host with me today, Matt Rossi. How you doing today, Matt?
Currently staring at my Discord going, don't trust you.
It wouldn't be a recording if we didn't have some random technical complication, friends. It just is how it is. So we are going to be doing a episode today that's a little bit different. This actually was born of a question that was sent in from one of our listeners, and we thank you for sending this in. If you have topics or questions or something you want us to talk about for any of our podcasts, be sure to send those in. We do pay attention to them. You can send them in at podcast@blizzardwatch.com. Specify the show that it's for, as well as any special pronunciation of your name. You can also hit us up on Discord. We have the Q and Podcast Questions channel. Same rules apply, as well as the Patreon Q and Podcast Questions channel, where we tend to look there first as a way of saying thank you for helping us keep the lights on. You can also send us messages directly on Patreon, and Liz will get them to us. We'll make sure she does. It's a thing. But this is actually something that was sent in by Mayron. Not so off-topic question for Lore Watch. It's in the realm. It's in between. It skirts the line. Would you DM or play a D&D adventure set in Azeroth? In a hypothetical scenario where the answer is yes, how would you like that adventure to be? Set in the current retail era, the classic era, Warcraft 3 times. And one last question. What race and class would your character be? So this is something that I wanted to just kind of talk about in general, because there was a Warcraft RPG. Matt and I both played it. We both own copies of it. It's something we've talked about a lot. And with our Tavern Watch imprint, we've been playing a lot of tabletop games. And it's only a matter of time before one of us at some point runs an Azeroth-style game for everybody. So I'm going to start with a modification of the question before we get into actually answering it. And it's, with all of the systems available and all of the growth that we've seen in the industry, is there one that you think would be best suited right now for Warcraft, and why? Like, if you were to run a Warcraft game, do you have one that really sticks out to you, Matt?
There's a few, actually, I think that it would be interesting. One is the Lumen system, or Powered by Light system. The one that does various... It basically is really good for creating a video game atmosphere.
Mm-hmm.
I think one of the games that was mentioned is Destiny. It actually, the light game itself is basically Destiny, and then it also they have an Overwatch type as well. I forget what the name of that game is, but they do an Overwatch style game with it. And I could see WoW, except that WoW is really complicated. So if you're trying to note for note recreate World of Warcraft, or that's a lot of work. I think it'd be easier to recreate Warcraft than World of Warcraft with it. But I could certainly see that in terms of that's a good system for if you want to have kind of a high powered, World of Warcraft characters get up there. So if you wanted to do a kind of high powered campaign, that's a system I think could be useful. I think, the variations on PBTA games at this point, there's so many different colors to PBTA and to games that are inspired by it.
Yeah, for those of you at home, that's Powered by the Apocalypse, which is what we're going to be playing. An upcoming Masks came on, Monster of the Week, Avatar, The Last Airbender. Those systems are all based on that.
Honestly, though, and I'm going to say this as this is a system that is not a very big, currently, played by a lot of people system. Back in the 80s, TSR, the guys who owned Dungeons & Dragons at the time, had a Marvel superheroes game.
Mm-hmm.
And that game, which is called, nowadays, it's usually called the FASERIP or Face Rip system, was kind of perfect. It did absolutely what I would want to do for a World of Warcraft game. There's a current Marvel game. There have been several. The current Marvel has their multiverse game, which is a very good game. The system is really interesting. I think it's the same basic system as has been used in other games, but with some modifications. But I think in general, a superhero role-playing game of any kind, whether it be Champions, whether it be Mutants and Masterminds, whether it even be Masks, although Masks is a PBTA game that uses playbooks. But I think playbooks would work really well for World of Warcraft. because you just have you'd have the warrior, the shaman.
Yeah.
You could just do that. You could just literally playbook them all out. There's a lot of stuff I consider. I think the worst system for it would be Dungeons and Dragons.
Yeah, ironically, I was thinking the same thing. Like, just to kind of jump in a little bit, D&D is and this is not to talk ill of D&D. D&D is a good game with, a rich history of lore. But the problem is, and we've talked about this a lot, D&D is mechanically, when it comes to combat, very complicated and makes combat take a long time. And if you wanted every fight to feel like a raid encounter, that's kind of where you would go. And
there's absolutely you've got a really good point there.
And I think one of the interesting things is it boils down to what type of game that you want to play. Do you want to play a more story narrative driven, like Warcraft RPG experience, or do you want to play a very like video gamey style game? And both are there's no wrong answers. Both are a correct answer, right? Me personally, I would absolutely lean to Powered by the Apocalypse. And it's not just because I'm a huge shill for it. It's because I do think that while it is rules light, it does something that a lot of other systems doesn't do, where it allows the players to have agency and control over the world and the story that's being told. For those of you that are not familiar with it, your playbooks generally are you have a few moves, and those moves allow you to do different things. There's generic things that you can do, like mix it up or like make a brain type move or something like that. But most of the time, like your particular class has like a few tricks that it can do very specifically to what you are. Whether it's like, I'm a warrior, this is a bunch of little tiny henchmen standing around me. This group of kobolds, well, I'm just going to use this whirlwind move that I have. And then you describe how that looks when you make the roll. The person running the game doesn't actually roll any dice. Everything is reactive off of how well you do. And because of that, I think it leans more into the narrative style. You describe what your spells look like. You describe what happens. You describe, what your successes look like. And then when you fail, the storyteller or the gamekeeper gets to explain how it fails and what the consequences are and what the complications are. And
some of the best stuff that's ever happened to me in a Powered by the Apocalypse games are on fails.
Yeah, as a matter of fact, it's a system that rewards you failing. That's how you earn experience points.
Yeah, but also just in terms of like what's described. I remember I rolled a failure on an attack where I was like using gravity powers to like throw a car at somebody. I still threw the car. That's not the question. The question isn't, did you successfully use your superpowers? The question was, where'd the car go? And the answer was, it didn't go where I wanted it. And that's the kind of thing. I think Joe's got a really good point here. I just wanted to say, yeah, that's a good idea. But you know what else you just made me think of, though?
What's that?
I was thinking, you know what? If you wanted a D&D game, but you wanted to do it and have it work well with World of Warcraft, you know what game would work really well? Dungeons and Dragons 4th edition.
Yeah, and you and I are in the same wavelength. For those of you at home, and I want to just 4th edition of D&D is actually much maligned among a lot of people for various reasons, but chief among them is it doesn't feel like D&D. In this particular case, it's a good thing. And the reason is 4th edition was designed at the height of MMOs, when MMOs were everywhere. And the people who were making tabletop games were afraid that they were losing ground in people to video games. And to an effect, they were to a certain point. So, I know a bunch of people that once they figured out you could RP in World of Warcraft, stopped playing tabletop for a while. Not forever, but for a while. So they developed 4th edition to be more video game-like, to give you more video game-esque abilities, where you had cooldowns as opposed to just pure resources, right? So you didn't have spell points per se. You did, but this spell you could use once a day, or this ability you could use once per short rest, or this one you could use whenever you wanted to because it was a basic ability. And it really does gamify itself well. And I'll let Matt talk about his points for it, but I think there's a very strong case for it being a good candidate for playing a D&D game that is World of Warcraft.
Yeah. One of the things I think it does, I have a hilarious story that's nothing related to this, but I keep thinking about it. Just that, if you know who James Jacobs is, go look him up if you don't. But he's a big deal at Paizo. He was for a long time a big deal at Dragon Magazine and Dungeon Magazine when they were still published as paper things. James ran a D&D game that I was in, and one day I was playing World of Warcraft, and he just said hi, and I realized James is playing WoW. A lot of for all the cynical, they were trying to counter program as video games. Some of it was just simply that they liked video games.
Yeah.
And they wanted to bring that in. One of the things that I think 4th edition does really well is it brings in MMO roles that you don't see on most tabletop. It brings in actual working tanking. There's stuff you can do in this game that makes tanking work when it's not computer controlled. And that's something that it's very hard to do in pen and paper, because it's very hard to justify why the evil villain wouldn't do the most effective thing. Why would he stay and keep hitting the guy who's the hardest to hit when he could kill the healer? But with this system, there's ways to do it, and they have the triad in most games of tank, heal, DPS. They then added a controller function, and the controller is pretty self-explanatory. It's basically a DPS who does battlefield control, and that's all stuff you can execute in this game. Which means you can really, if you want to make fights that feel like WoW fights, you could absolutely do it with 4th edition. But I also have to say, I think Powered by the Apocalypse is a really inspired choice as well, because not just because of the playbooks and stuff, which is one thing, but also because of the way the narrative stuff, your game masters don't feel adversarial in most Powered by the Apocalypse.
Yeah.
Games. There's a feeling of adversarialness that's real easy to happen in D&D, because it feels like the monsters are trying to kill you, but it doesn't feel like the monsters are trying to kill you sometimes. It feels like the dungeon master is trying to kill you. And that's something that I personally try very hard to fight against when I run games. And when I play games, I try not to assume that of my DM. Mm-hmm. I never assume that my DM or GM or whatever word you want to use is trying to kill me, because they could kill me anytime they want. They could just say, "Oh, and you die." That's not the point of the game. Depending on what you're trying to do, what kind of Warcraft you're trying to run, 4th edition D&D has a lot of tools for a lot of those options, but it's still a D&D game. At the end of the day, I understand why people didn't like it at the time. I didn't like it at the time. It's after it was no longer the main D&D that I really started realizing, oh, this is actually really good.
And how much moved forward into D&D from there.
Yeah, absolutely. It's just that it didn't, to the people playing at the time, it didn't feel like Dungeons and Dragons. And that's a very subjective thing, but it's when enough people say that there's currently a very popular RPG out there that became popular because they wanted to keep playing the D&D they were already playing. Mm-hmm. That's it's not an unfair statement. But I think in the case of this, the question you're asking, it would work really well. If that's something you're willing to do. PBTA has the advantage of not feeling like you're fighting the dungeon master. You feel like you're collaborating with them.
Yeah, and I think I think that actually carries through the spirit of Warcraft too, which I think is something that a lot of people they mention it in interviews when they talk about design encounters and when they talk about designing the narrative, and I don't think it gets nearly enough attention. The game developers are not trying to just make impossible tasks for you. They want to make something that feels rewarding to overcome. And they're crafting a world with care and intention for you to enjoy. And whether that is your side quests, your daily quests, your interactions with NPCs, these in-game cinematics, the raid encounters, the dungeon encounters, or the various other things you can do. And it's very much in the spirit of not adversarial, but a almost collaborative thing.
Yeah, there was a Blizzard Watch in particular, not Blizzard Watch in particular, BlizzCon in particular, where one of the designers said, "It's not my job to design encounters that will kill you. It's my job to design encounters where they will lose to you very convincingly."
Yeah. Yeah, and think about that too, right? Like think about the treadmill of the game itself. There's a lot of it that is very easy to gamify. And one of the things that I think is really cool is with the rather relative cornucopia of content we have right now, all of these things fit really well into a tabletop experience. And I'm just going to throw a couple examples of it, regardless of the system you use. But you have delves, which are in dungeons, which are really great for small groups of people and telling a concise story in a small amount of time. These are things that we would consider equivalent to something like a one shot in D&D or a tabletop game. Then you have your raid experiences, and these tend to be longer, like dives through not just combat encounters, but sometimes puzzles and other things like that. That has literally been the bread and butter of tabletop role-playing games since the 70s, if not
the
longer.
Temple of Elemental Evil is the first raid ever.
Yeah, it really is. And if you go back to some of the original WoW design documents, and I remember this I want to say it was the BlizzCon I attended in 2008. They talked about the influence of things like the Temple of Elemental Evil in things like Burning Crusade. And you could absolutely see that when you're going through like Hellfire Citadel and other areas. And when you start looking at these things through that lens, you can start to see how all these pieces move in. Earning reputation with various factions is very easy to gamify in a tabletop role-playing experience. You have a home base or a home city that your group works out of, and the more tasks you do for whether it's a noble or whether it's the people of the town or whatever the case is, the more trust you earn. That's like leveling up your reputation for them. The easier things are for you to get, the cheaper they are for you to acquire, whatever the case is, you're breeding that goodwill. That all that is reputation grinding. And I think that's absolutely fascinating. And then again, that storytelling experience over the years, and it's very easy for people to say, well, we don't write the story in WoW. The thing is, we kind of do. Our interactions, our reactions to NPCs shape some of what the story is that we get. Things we enjoy or things that the community are very vocal about, or at least are known to be passionate about, get big story moments, get big pieces written for them. Belemeth, the entire thing where elves get their new home, is because players were chomping at the bit for the completion of that story. They wanted these NPCs to find a home. They wanted these NPCs to have something of their own from after being cast about, and not just the night elves, all of the elves. And we got that. We got that because they were trying to create an experience and tell a story that we wanted to see. And I think that's a really important thing to note. Now, to move into the other questions, because there's a bunch here. The question of how you would like that adventure to be and what era you would want it set in, there are so many choices here. So I'll let Matt go first. But what would you like the adventure to be based off of, and what era would you like it to be set in?
See, here's where I make a couple of confessions. One is I've done this 4 times. I've run anything from like a multiple session game to a straight up one shot in various parts of Azeroth.
Mm-hmm.
I also sometimes I just steal little things from not just WoW, not just Azeroth, but from various games I'm playing. I will steal bits and pieces. I don't. What is one of the things I once said is that as long as you are not publishing this thing to make money, every game is going to have stuff that you've experienced. I remember the first I think straight up AD&D game I ran. Like I think 25% of it was Willow. If you don't remember the movie Willow, I recommend it. Val Kilmer in one of his best roles. Rest in peace, sir. It was a lot of fun to do that with it. For the stuff I've stolen, I don't know if Joe recognized it at the time. If anyone was going to, it would have been him. But the first game I ran for Blizzard Watch, the initial adventure was basically set Black Rock Mountain.
Mm-hmm.
I put it on an island, but it was
100%. Oh yeah.
Yeah, I figured you caught it. I didn't think anybody else did. Liz maybe. Anne, if she was paying attention, but Anne was role playing really hard, so I was pretty sure I got it past her. But I knew you were going to be a problem. But you didn't say anything, and that was great. So I kept going.
I was just rolling with it.
Yeah, but I straight up at one point near the end of that campaign, I straight up the map of the dungeon they were in was just Blackwing Lair. It was straight up Blackwing Lair, to the point where they did something you couldn't do in the actual Blackwing Lair, which is something I love about tabletop. They skipped a big portion of the stuff that was in. They skipped the suppression room because they went up to that little roof area. The way that dungeons are often designed in World of Warcraft, they often have fast routes back.
Mm-hmm.
Like Blackwing Lair doesn't have a fully fledged fast route back, but you can cut a lot of corners and get back faster than you left. But in WoW, you can't climb up that way. But in a tabletop game, why not? So they skipped a ton of stuff I was going to throw at them. It wouldn't have been exactly the same stuff. I wasn't going to actually do the suppression room because, oh my lord. But they just completely skipped it. They just didn't fight that monster. And that's something that I think is something that is great about the confluence between media that you consume online, video game type stuff, and media you consume, the tabletop realm where it's a bunch of different people generating a narrative, because they can generate a narrative that you don't see coming. And that was something I love doing. In terms of the actual, this is set in Azeroth. This is a straight up Warcraft based adventure. Back in, I want to say 2016,
Mm-hmm.
it might have been even earlier than that. The last hurrah for a group I was in, there's a store in Edmonton called Warp One. The last hurrah for that game I was playing at that store was like a 4 or 5 part. This is complicated, but basically there's a period of time in Azeroth's history where elves are born. The first elves, who are basically dark trolls who are exposed to the powers of the Well of Eternity. And we didn't have everything that we now know, but this is about, I guess Legion's about the time this was.
Yeah.
Pretty sure this is around the time Legion came out. So taking the Temple of Elune and all the statues in it of elves being elves, even though, I went with this idea of like the first elves created and you're playing one of them. Like, so everybody in my group was one of the very first elves created. And their whole deal was each session took place like 300 years after, 3 or 4, sometimes more, after the previous one. And they went from a bunch of like refugees on the shore of the Well of Eternity to the foundation of Azshara's empire and the birth of Azshara. And so I ran through that. The players each played on. 2 of the players ended up. They didn't intend this, but they ended up playing Azshara's parents. And I went with it because their characters absolutely hated each other. But by the end, like since like at this point a couple thousand years had almost passed, they were like together and they had like she was pregnant and I was like, and yes, and you decide to name her Dawn of Beauty and cut to, big towers going and she's up top and one of them goes, wait a minute. What does she look like? I'm like, oh, your daughter? I don't know, like whitish blue hair, blue dark skin, glorious golden eyes. And they're like, mother. And that's the session. And I loved that game because it was so much that they are doing. It wasn't me. I was just hanging on. Every game I've ever run, the best stuff comes from the players. I've never felt like anything was my work. And this one was absolutely the case because they were pushing so hard to unify the elven people and to have their dynastic relationship. And it was like, boom, there you go, man. But you could do that with any era. There's so much history in Azeroth. You could do an entire game about the Mage Wars. I mean, the Mage Troll Wars.
Mm-hmm.
And you could just do it in Arathi. And that would be, you'd have elves and humans and trolls and there's all these like cataclysmic magical battles and the birth of like an actual civilization and just all this crazy stuff. But that's like one little piece that's only a couple thousand years ago. So yeah, I mean, I could sit here and list tons all day, but I feel like I've gone on for a bit and I should let you go for a bit and then we can like switch back to me if there's more time.
Yeah, no, we have plenty of time for this. One of the things that I've always wanted to do, and you're right, like in my time running games, I've absolutely stolen from moments of World of Warcraft, especially for people that didn't play. and just to see how they would react to certain things. Like I have run a castle being sieged by those that would have been wronged because they didn't get their bills paid, and by the noble families who thought that, oh, we can just get away with this. Sounds like what happened in Stormwind, because it was basically what happened in Stormwind that generated the Defias Brotherhood and everything that came through there, the riots and quelling that. And like I've done story elements like that and pulled them in. But of all the things that I haven't done, I actually have one written out that I would love to run at some point. And I literally have the notebook. I dug it out for this episode, where I wanted to go back to the time leading up to the War of the Ancients. And I mean, before the demons hit, before they breached the portal, before there was all out warfare. And I want to talk about going to the political and sort of like espionage based storyline of the resistance against Queen Azshara and her sycophants, where during this time, and we visited back here a few times, we know that people who didn't agree with her were disappeared. We know that she was trying to have an iron control over her people, that she sought power and adoration. And I want to dive deep into that. And it hasn't always felt appropriate timing wise with the real world, but I thought this idea of coming together, having the players be part of the resistance, because people forget the resistance was pretty big, right? It wasn't just elves. Like, yes, you had the Sisterhood of Elune, the Moon Guard, the Rook's Guard. You had the ancient guardians that were presenting themselves. You had various time travelers that wound up going back in time during the War of the Ancients. They could have been there a little bit earlier. The Dragonflights got involved, and they could have been there in their visage forms. There were earthen present for this, which I think is also very interesting. But also Tauren and Furbolg and centaurs.
The High Mountain Tauren come directly out of the War of the Ancients. So yeah, they were Tauren getting involved.
They were absolutely Tauren involved. They didn't get their horns until afterwards for Hulm's blessing from Cenarius. But having these players, you have a wider range of races that they could play as. But they're the underground resistance. They're trying to figure out how to get people safely out. Every skirmish is high stakes. They have all these moral dilemmas that they have to decide. They defeat one of the mage guards or one of the dissident Rook's Guard that is loyal to Azshara, and they have to make a decision. Do they let that person live? Do they take them out? Can they risk that information going back? One of their compatriots gets captured. They have a clear shot. Do they risk that person being tortured for the information on the resistance against Queen Azshara, or do they take the shot and take them out so that they can't be tortured? Like, this whole spy, like, underground thing really lends itself well to that era, and it's something I always wanted to do, because while we always get bits and pieces leading up to the War of the Ancients, there's all that turmoil and all that time before it that we don't get to see or really participate in. And I think it would be really rich for a game and really rich in storytelling potential. Yes, where it ends, but to me, it's like my favorite Star Wars movie is Rogue One. And the reason it's Rogue One is because it tells a complicated story that, yes, how it ends, but it doesn't matter, because everything in between is more important than the actual ending itself. And I'd love to see what players did with that rich in-between area, that gray area that isn't fully defined, what choices they would make, what deals they would strike, what entities they would bargain with, and how they would deal with this constant pressure of the mages sweeping through and trying to find the resistance of Azshara's personal guard, like, on high alert. I would absolutely love to run that at some point, and I think it would be really, really interesting. At least to me, it would be, and hopefully, I would find players that would find that potentially interesting as well.
I'm just sitting here going, "That's really cool," and then I'm like, I probably should say something. But I mean, that's just like that's the wild thing about this kind of adaptation. You didn't ask about other games or other worlds, but I'm gonna bring this over to Diablo for a second, because I've wanted to run a Diablo campaign literally all my life. Like, I never got to. I still haven't gotten to do it, but I really want to do one The closest I got was I basically reskinned Diablo with D&D creatures. Like, instead of it being the primevals, it was Orcus, Grozit, and Demogorgon that had been cast to the campaign world. But I stole a whole bunch of Diablo for that, and it was a very Diablo-like D&D game, but it still wasn't Diablo. I've always wanted to run one set right at the time of hunting the primevals. I'd love to do one going back to the Sin War. Like, imagine playing, like, the thing about the Sin War is if you're playing in the Sin War, you're playing a Nephilim. And that means you basically could take like the rules to Exalted and just run Diablo with it. And so there's a ton of stuff like that I would love to do and haven't got a chance to. For Azeroth, I think the ones I've actually run or played in, I played in a game that was set right after Warcraft 3, but which ended up on a world where things had gone differently, and instead of Neltharion getting corrupted, it was actually Ysera who got corrupted, and a different world comes out of the different experiences and so forth. So it was Azeroth, but it was a different timeline, for lack of a better word, or timeway, whatever word you want to use. I didn't run that one; I just played in it. But that one was fun because I got to play. My character was literally a 5 levels of barbarian, because we used D&D for this one. This was a straight up D&D one, which is one of the reasons I feel like D&D is not a great choice for it. But we're talking like 5 levels of barbarian and like 5 levels of ranger for a 10th level character. And it was a reskinned Goliath. But in the game, I was like a Vrykul, but a Curse of Fleshed one, but not one that would go on all the way down to being human yet. Just like the ones you see when you first go to Northrend, right? Mm-hmm, there's plenty of they're made out of meat Vrykul running around. It was one of those, so it was fun. I got to play Vrykul, but again, it was a reskin Goliath. It was one of those things where everything was just reskinned, and that's fine. Quite frankly, I feel like that is something to be considered. If you're trying to run a game like this, but you don't have time to sit down and really think about like all the rules to it and all the ways you want to make it work, reskinning stuff is fine. You do not have to like go and reinvent the orc to make orcs that are more like Azeroth orcs. Just say they're like that. At least with Azeroth, you've got a lot of classic fantasy tropes to basically steal. Like elves, you could just, okay, fine. Night elves are essentially drow. Doesn't really work, but you could reskin it close enough. So but lore wise, there's so much storytelling you can steal from that I feel like if you are not interested in doing the hard work of completely making everything 100% game compatible and don't feel like you have to do that, you do not. Some people like doing that, but if you don't, you do not have to make it so they can exactly recreate their WoW character in the tabletop game you're going to run. It's fine if you just use the classes that are in the player's handbook, and just get close enough. I don't know how you feel about that one, Joe.
No, I feel very much the same way. And if you look, the other thing that I think is interesting too is obviously our community, the WoW community and the D&D community, there's a lot of crossover. I should just call it the tabletop community. And you can find various conversions of different things as well online, many places. This includes places like Drive-Thru RPG, where free modules are available, the DM's Guild. There's a lot of other places where people have taken the time to already do some conversions as well. So one of the things that I think people will ask about is, how do you represent iconic abilities? And those can be spells or moves or things that are available to classes that already exist. And Matt and I have had conversations about this in the past. Like warriors and fighters in D&D, warriors from WoW and fighters in D&D, there's a lot of overlap already. There's a lot of stuff like you talk about monkey grip, or Titan's grip. I'm sorry. In D&D, it was monkey grip. It was, I'm going to use a two-handed weapon, one-handed style. Like, this is a thing I can do now. Like, those already existed. Whirlwind is already a thing that existed. I would think it was actually a 4th edition like ability that they could cast and use.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
battle masters to let you do things like do trip attacks and gouging attacks and things that are very much stuff that you would find warriors in WoW doing. And like, I think that's really fascinating. In fourth edition, there was also a shaman class already built in, and it operated very similar to a shaman in WoW as far as like,
Yeah, it was pretty obvious where they got their inspiration.
oh yeah. But conversions for that for fifth edition still exists today. You can literally go and get that and use that. You don't have to reinvent the wheel if you want to have somebody play a shaman. Like certain spells and abilities, all these things exist, and a lot of them are completely free. So you don't have to do a whole lot of the hard work, and you can focus more on the storytelling. And again, I know we talked about this a little bit and kind of dove aside and are weaving back in, but like, there's so many interesting stories that you could potentially tell. Stratholme before Arthas and before the grains were delivered, the infected grains were delivered, and what that life looked like. Because again, Stratholme was off on its own. It had its own culture, its own life. Yes, it was part of a kingdom, but like, it had its own adventurers. It had people that would have to go out and do stuff. It was not necessarily just a, basic town. It was a fortified position. It was exactly what you would expect, like adventurers to base out of. You could do stuff with the Arathi Highlands and everything that existed beforehand. Like, we talk about that a lot, where like there hasn't been a whole lot in Arathi for a while, and now we're starting to do more there. But what about when Arathi was like the height of its empire and it was its own thing?
Yeah.
You could do.
I mean, people forget this, but every human civilization that we got in Warcraft, from Warcraft 1 on, all originated from the Arathi Highlands.
Mm-hmm.
That's where the first human empire was built. That's where the group that spread out and covered half the continent came from that one place.
Yeah, and then there's other things too, like what was happening in Northrend before the Lich King got there, right? Like when Arthas got there and became the Lich King, there's a whole period of time before that happened where life was still existing. There,
Yeah, I mean, there was obviously human settlements of some kind, both in the Grizzly Hills and in Howling Fjord. There was I'm trying to remember the other place, this Howling Fjord and Borean Tundra. They both had settlements. Grizzly Hills obviously had settlements. There were obviously places where no humans were living, but there were other people living there. The Nerubians had their own little empire. What's up with that? I mean, there's a ton. There's literally a ton of stuff you could do with that. Just that one place.
Yeah, I mean, and even going further north, like you have all the Vrykul and all the other folks that were like, they lived there. That was them. Like, they didn't just worship the Lich King. That happened afterwards. But what was their life in there? And like, you see glimmers of it, but you have this time in between. The Tuskarr as well. They've been living there for generations. You have so many options that you could really do anywhere, go anywhere. And then if you're doing a pure Azeroth thing, let's say you wanted to do more than one and you wanted to do more than one era, you have the ability to do such things like, I don't know, the Caverns of Time, which is a really great potential tabletop vehicle for, oh, well, we're going to go back to 10,000 years ago. Here's where your adventurers go. By the way, that time traveler thing I talked about earlier, there you go. There's a way for it to happen. Or we want to experience the fall of Koresh. You can go ahead and do that. Like, you have all of these various options. You can go anywhere, do anything. And there are so many places in WoW's story that haven't been fully discovered or told yet, that you just have so much freedom to pick whatever you want. And I think it's really, really cool. And I think it's why folks like me and Matt and other people I know that play World of Warcraft or have played World of Warcraft and play tabletop games have borrowed from some of those elements as often as we have, because we like playing the what if game. What if this happened, or what if this, was explored, or wonder what happened there. And I think that's really, really important.
One that I really wanted to run, like for a long, long time, was a gnome-based one.
Ooh,
and
yeah.
I ended up using it as an article for the site because I didn't have a group who were willing to play it.
Gnomer Before the Fall.
I called it. No, it was Cult of the Mechanical, and what it was based around was Mecha Gearmaster Mechazod. Sorry, who, when you go to Northrend, they dig him up, and he's this crazy robo gnome who turns all the other gnomes back into robo-gnomes. He undoes the curse of flesh on them. And there's a whole bit where you have to stop him. And I'm like, what if that guy got back up to where, he went to Ulduar and got Mimiron to listen to him. And Mimiron was like, yeah, we should turn them all back into my servants.
Oh, and they reconnected with Mechagon, who was already trying to do that exact same thing. Oh,
yeah, and you could do this whole D&D campaign about the gnomes are suddenly this massive threat, and everyone in Azeroth is like, what's going to happen? And they're using that they want to uncurse everybody, and some people don't have an uncursed state to go to. Like there's nothing. What happens if you try to undo the curse of flesh on an orc? The orc doesn't have a curse of flesh as such. The orc degenerated down to being an orc. They are the gnomes of Draenor. Yeah, the joke we used to tell, which is actually really accurate. But they're not, like, nothing made them that way, right? So what happens? Can you make a robo orc? Or does it just turn into a giant mountain? Like, because the primordial ancestor of all orcs was a walking mountain. So now that's back, would it work on just one orc, or do all orcs get turned into this one giant walking orc mountain? Or maybe it doesn't physically grab them, but what if there's it unleashes this mental plague where orcs everywhere are just falling into comatose states, and as they're doing so, the ground underneath Durotar is trembling, and they're like, we got to stop this sleeping plague before it destroys everybody. And it turns out it's just this mountain being born out of all the orcs' subconscious, because the orcs it's trying to decurse people who weren't cursed. But they were made by a titan, and they were made by a titan as a giant walking, talking mountain. So it starts does that happen? What happens? And there's a lot of it. There's so much you could do just with that. And that's just one thing. Imagine if you wanted to do Warlords of Draenor. We went back about 30 years when we went to Draenor. We actually went back in time. That's something I think a lot of people forget. When you're standing on Draenor during Warlords of Draenor, you're about 30 to 35 years ago.
We can go further.
Yeah, what?
We could go further back.
We could go further back, but also one thing people talked about constantly, but never anyone dealt with, is what's going on in Azeroth when the orcs aren't showing up.
Yeah, and also with the we talked about this a little bit too before on I think both podcasts. You have a period of time from the time we leave the Warlords of Draenor to the time we go back to get the Magar orcs, and you could do everything that happened in between there. The Army of Light taking over Draenor and what that looked like.
And how Draenor was still dying the whole time.
Yeah.
It was too late to stop what had been done to it. And there is a lot, imagine a completely a side story being run at the exact same time as the Maghar storyline. There's another storyline where people are evacuating the people who were once part of the Army of the Light, but who are this has gone crazy. People are, the planet's falling apart and they're fighting. This was a pitch I actually tried to run. If you've seen Man of Steel, there's lots of reasons to like and dislike this movie, but the opening of the movie, just taken as an action set piece, where Jor-El is trying to steal the Codex and get his kid out of Krypton before it blows up. Imagine a bunch of adventurers port back into the moment where Yor-El is going off to try and fight with the Maghar, and just trying to get as many kids and innocent people out as possible. And you have this whole, you got to run and gun against the fanatics to try and get just regular Draenei who just want to live the normal life, and get them the heck to literally you'd be playing the commandant that you played in Draenor, getting them out through your portal, because you have a portal back to Azeroth. You could get them out. So that could be a whole campaign. You get there, you form an underground resistance, you make nice with Yor-El because you remember her, but you're realizing this is nuts. And when she goes off on her big campaign, instead of you attacking her or doing anything like that, because you know what's going to happen, you get as many people out as you can through your portal. and you have to fight the fanatics off while they're evacuating, and evacuating is like, and to you it's like, when you get back to Azeroth or whatever, it's like, I only saved a couple hundred people. Like, so many people died, and they'd be like, yeah, but you did save these couple hundred people. And that could be like, imagine that D&D campaign. You could totally run that. You could, with any system you want. It doesn't have to be D&D. Unfortunately for some of us, the word D&D has almost become synonymous with a role-playing game in my head.
Yeah, it's become its own verb. Yeah,
it's hard. But I do believe, there's just so many stories you could do. Imagine one of the ones I really loved, and this wasn't my idea. A friend of mine told me on this one and was trying to sell me on it. R.I.P. Dougal. He wanted us to run as the Titans. Like, he wanted to do one shot where we played the Titans.
I can see that.
And yeah, I don't know what he wanted to do with it, because he didn't tell me. He was like, he wanted me to play in it. We got as far as me being Sargeras. He was like, you have to play Sargeras for me. And I'm like, okay. Feels kind of like, playing as, I don't know, like, who's like, who would be that? You're like, it's like playing as Anakin, I guess. Like, it's kind of weird, man. But yeah, it was absolutely something he wanted to do. And it would have been really cool. I think it would have been very high concept, though.
Yeah.
Like, and that's the thing. Warcraft, I don't know how to put this politely. Warcraft is like a big pig. It'll eat anything. And you can go play WoW for a weekend, and you can go from stuff where you can hear Jack Kirby's voice in the background going, not bad, I like the Arch, to like, this story over here is straight up, it's like a horror book. Like every so often Mechagon really gets to me. It's actually horrifying if you let yourself think about Mechagon, and it's just there. So yeah, there's a lot. I'm getting overly excited, so I want to stop and let you talk for a bit.
Well, I think we have enough time to move into sort of the last section of the question here. And that last section of the question is, if we were playing in the game, not running the game, but playing in the game, what race and class would your characters be? And I think people are going to expect us to go with the obvious answers, and those are definitely on the plate. But I'm curious if there's anything else that really speaks to you, Matt.
I want to play a warlock because I want to actually. One of the things WoW doesn't let you really do as much as I would like it to let you do is really grapple with what you are doing as a warlock. Like, because warlocks don't have to be yay demons. They can be, you get on the ground, lick my feet, and do what I say to demons. You don't have to be friendly with them. You don't even have to, like, you can be, I'm taking your power to serve my own ends. And I feel no more for you than I would for an internal combustion engine if I had one. I don't worship the gasoline I put in my car. I'm certainly not going to worship you. And that's like something I feel like I've heard people talk about it, like, in their own justifications, but it's not part of the warlock class the way I feel like it should be. Like, I really feel like warlocks could be, like, you could have a good warlock. You could have a warlock who like wants to save his people and is no way, shape, or form evil, has no ulterior motives, just wants to do the best he can, and is enslaving demons because they're effing demons. They came here, they blew up like multiple cities, they rained from the sky as meteorites on green fire. Yeah, that we can't get rid of them, so we might as well use them. And that's just one thing I'd love to do. There's tons of stuff I would love to do. I'd love to play as a troll. An Azerothian troll is one of the more fascinating versions of trolls I've ever seen. Because they're not just the mindless monsters you get in a lot of different versions. They're people with their own culture and their own identity, and their really unique way of looking at spirit worlds and spirits, where it literally can I talk to it? Is it something I can have some kind of relationship with? Then it's a Loa. I don't care if what category you put it in is immaterial to me. It's a Loa. I'm one of the guys, I like a lot of troll stuff in WoW, troll lore, but I really feel like we missed something when Gonk didn't get used a heck of a lot more. Nothing wrong with Bwansamdi, nothing wrong with Muzala, but man, I wanted more Gonk. Can you imagine, like, when we finally get whatever the new Loa of Kings is going to be? When I can't remember his name.
Vol'jin.
Oh my god! Thank you, Vol'jin. When we find out what kind of Loa of Kings Vol'jin is going to be, I want Gonk to be like his Sancho. You know what I mean? Like his guy who's there, always going, "Have you considered biting it and then disemboweling it with your claws?" No? Oh, that's usually my first idea. Gonk, please. Like, all right. You could try talking to them. But again, I don't want you to forget the concept of disemboweling them. That could work. They don't even have bowels. They're robots. Then all the better. I would love to role play. I would love to play somebody who was like the troll, a dwarf druid. I mean, not dwarf, sorry. A troll druid. Man, dwarf and trolls hanging out together is also a cool idea, but a troll druid in Azeroth. That's like right up there for me, just in terms of the different kinds of troll druids we now have. Because we now have Zandalari troll druids who are basically just dinomancers. And then we've got, like, the various other kinds of trolls. Darkspear in particular. Darkspear druids are freaking hilarious to me because they basically just showed up and told, hey, we're here now. What? Who are you? Oh, yeah, we're new druids. We're trolls. Yeah, Gonk sent us. What? What's happening? He turned into a bear. What do you want me to do? If he could turn into a bear, I guess he's in. Why does he have tusks? Because he's a troll. Of course he has tusks. I don't ask you why you have big old ears. He has big old ears. Like, that's true. They does have big old ears. But yeah. So I feel like those are kind of things I want to stretch in ways that you can't really do in the game, just because the game is what it is. Mm-hmm. It's a game for like millions of people to play. I want to pick out characters who are just really wildly disparate and run down what that would mean.
And I'm in the same boat, right? Like, so everybody's going to be expecting me to say some flavor of shaman, and don't get me wrong, I would absolutely play a shaman again. I played a shaman almost exclusively in the 4th edition of D&D for a reason. But the thing that I've been thinking a lot about is the one race and class combination we have yet to get in game. Night Elf Paladin. I am 1,000% convinced that they existed at one point in time. That the priestesses and warriors of Elune and the Order had the equivalent of what were paladins. But that has been lost to time. And so one of the things that I would absolutely love to do is explore what that would look like, what the Order of Elune or Order of the Moon or whatever we wanted to call it looked like, would act like, what its paladin tradition was. And I think that would be wickedly fun. And it's because I've been playing Paladin a lot lately, but also just really thinking about that. Like, you could have such a really deep and interesting exploration of what that order would be like, what that would look like, what that would feel like. And I think it would be really, really cool. In the same way that you're talking about, like, looking at things that we don't have a ton of representation on or a ton of information on in game, and giving you sort of that I don't want to call it wiggle room, but allowing you to sort of fill in the blanks, create that space, right?
Yeah, you can explore stuff that's otherwise not available.
Yeah, and that's where I would go, because I think it would be absolutely fascinating and fun to play. Also, I think that in tabletop games, paladins are often, I don't want to say like misunderstood, but they're often overlooked as very simplistic characters. And I think that they can be very, trying to think of how to phrase this. They can be very complex individuals. And I think,
absolutely. I think you're right.
And it's not just, I must smite evil, or I can't do this thing because I'm a paladin. No, they're knights with a purpose. And
you know what I did once, honestly, and this is not necessarily related to WoW, but related to paladins. I played a character who dressed up all in black and snuck around on rooftops. I had like 2 levels of rogue to let me do a whole bunch of different stuff, but he was absolutely a paladin. And he was he was straight up Batman. Batman is a paladin, guys.
Yeah.
If any DC character is a paladin, it's Batman. I know you're looking at Big Blue. Big Blue's not a paladin.
No, Batman has a
Big
very
Blue,
strict code of conduct. Has a
yeah,
very yeah.
yeah. Big Blue would absolutely do. He's just as likely to be neutral or chaotic good as he is to be just lawful good or to have a strict code. He has one rule that he doesn't break, but then like he'll go and sink a navy's entire ships if it'll stop a war or whatever. That guy will play fast and loose. He just will never hurt people. Batman will absolutely hurt people, but he will never deviate from his code.
Mm-hmm.
It doesn't matter what happens. You could do anything to break that guy. You could have the new gods, like Darkseid can send two guys to literally put him in a machine and torture him with his own life history until he breaks, and he'll never break because he is Batman. And that's a paladin. That right there, that unwavering commitment. You want to know another paladin? Darth Vader.
Yeah.
Darth Vader is an anti-paladin, but he was originally a paladin. He is in modern versions, he would be the Oathbreaker, but it's still a paladin. It's still that same thing that I broke because of a specific reason, and now I apply all that zeal that I used to apply to this completely different direction, but it's the same zeal. So yeah, I love paladins in D&D, and quite frankly, they're one of my favorite classes in it. And I feel like WoW has so much potential for its paladins, not just the Night Elf one, which by the way, I think is great because I already imagine myself. I can imagine you go through and you find out one of the reasons there aren't many Night Elf paladins anymore is because they were so likely to get themselves killed trying to save everybody.
Exactly, right? Like they would be the ones that were first in line, like standing up to the tyranny of like what was going on, that or even the first in line to like protect people from the invasion of the demons, that the order gets decimated. And I kind of like that. I don't want to say that fatalistic or hopeless nature of it, but
they're always willing to, they're absolutely always willing to stand up and go, okay, get everyone to the boat. I'm going to hold them here. There's literally 5,000 of them. Yeah. So they, I'll wait for them to get a few more just so it's fair.
Mm-hmm.
Go, that kind of thing where they're just paladins. That's what they do. It's a part of their nature even. So yeah, it is something I'd love to see, but I'd love to see for other races too. Like I'd love to see more paladins. You don't even have to add more to the game, but what do we know about Tauren paladins? Almost nothing. Mm-hmm. We got one. What are the Blood Elf paladins doing? We had a good example. Liadrin got a little bit of an arc, but man, I'd love to see more dwarf paladins. There's dwarf paladins, and there have been dwarf paladins for years. And how often do they get to be anything but a joke? No, man, I think paladins really, that'd be something cool to do in a WoW themed game, is play a paladin and play up like all the different ways you can be a paladin, because it's not just about I'm rigidly adherent to this. No, it's about you. I said I'm going to do something, so I'm going to do it. Like, who I remember reading a really cool article about this. I know we're running out of time here. But who's a paladin? Clint Eastwood's various Western characters,
mm-hmm.
especially in Unforgiven. Killing is a hell of a thing. You're not just taking away a man's life. You're taking away everything he ever was and everything he could ever be. That's a paladin. Imagine walking into town going, I don't want to kill you, but by God, I will.
Who are also paladins, which I think is absolutely fascinating. If we're going to break down to that, and I know what somebody's going to say to this, but bear with me. The Ninja Turtles, as written.
No, absolutely no.
The original Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles.
Like, you could argue that they're so high, but they have paladin. Yeah, absolutely. I totally agree with you on that.
Again,
because of the way they are.
Yeah, the commitment the commitment to the code, right? Like it's they will not cross that boundary. They will not, like, they understand the weight of their power. Like it is, and this is not just to say that like paladins are cool. I like paladins, but this is to say, it's an unexplored space that I think even in WoW, while we have studied the paladin orders and they've gotten a bunch of time, like as far as like screen time goes, I don't think it's been enough. I don't think.
Well, let's look at it this way too. You talk about, like, they've gotten a lot of screen time, but how often do you, whether you're playing a paladin or not, get to feel what it means to be one?
Yeah.
It's not just about going forth and calling on the light to smite things. There's a determination you have to make. It's one of the things about the original, the origins of paladins in our legends and myths come from a group of French knights who served Charlemagne. And they were effectively like the Knights of the Round Table, but for Charlemagne. And the whole premise of it is that they stood up at a point where they knew this was likely going to be it. There is that element of them where when somebody has to be willing to make the choice, they make it, whether or not it's what they want. In a really weird way, I feel like they missed a huge beat not when having Tyrande make a paladin order.
Yeah.
When she became the Night Warrior, because that was her doing that.
Yeah, and that's we've talked about that before, and it's something that I know a lot of players feel very passionate about, and maybe we'll get it in the future. But until then, that's what I would choose to play, given the opportunity in an Azeroth based tabletop game. Like, you give me that ability, you let me have that be, the option, or one of the options that I can choose. I'm all there for it. So, but I think that's going to do it for us right now. I do want to.
Because if we don't, guys, we would literally
We're going to be here
stop
all day. But I do want to thank Mayron for sending us that question. It was a fun exploration. I really do appreciate it. And for the rest of you, again, if you have questions for us, or if you want to send us a topic that you want us to cover in depth, by all means, send those in to us. You can send us in at podcast@blizzardwatch.com. Specify the show that it is for in the subject line, as well as any special pronunciation of your name. You can also hit us up on Discord. We have the Q&A podcast questions channel. It's open to everybody. Same rules apply. And then if you are a Patreon supporter, we have the Patreon Q&A podcast questions channel, where we tend to look there first as a way of saying thank you for helping us keep the lights on. And if you want to hit us up on just Patreon, you can do so as well. Liz will absolutely get us any messages you send, and we will incorporate them as we can. With that, friends, I do want to thank you for joining us on this journey. We'll see you next week.